This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to coffee number 5. Today, I want to say I met someone a long time ago doing a job interview, to be honest with you. And you do so many jobs, interview over time. And I was young. I was very young. And I don't know if that position probably wasn't a good fit for me because I didn't get it. And which I'm grateful today I didn't get it. But I remember the person who interviewed me. She was kind. She was memorable. She made a difference. And so when I ran into her many years later, I knew I had to have her in this podcast because her trajectory is amazing. But also, I remember her kindness. And that's something that it always shows through. And it's an honor to have you here, Melissa Richards person. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Laura. I'm touched to hear you say that. Isn't it funny how just small moments can make these lasting impacts? Um, and it's funny, you're not the first person for whom I forged a connection interviewing for a role that either that person didn't get or the role for whatever reason didn't come to fruition. I have a mutual mentoring relationship with a woman who I interviewed for a content and brand activation role, and we ended up pausing the role when I was at Papa John's.
Mhm.
But she and I stayed in touch because there was so much I could learn from her on the social media and content marketing side. And she really wanted to get my guidance as she progressed throughout her career. So yeah, it's funny how that happens, isn't it?
It's so interesting. And I mean, that's the power of collaboration. And I think, and we were talking because we are together in several groups, and the power of collaboration, it's tremendous if you do it right. If you
Yeah.
go not with the intention or with an agenda, it's just to really nurture those connections.
Yeah, whenever I approach a conversation, I feel like, how can I be helpful?
Yeah.
And in 20 plus years of corporate marketing, I always tried to respond to even email solicitations or emails as long as I felt like I could sincerely be helpful. I would, if there was something in there that I said, you know, this is not for me, and here's why. Or if there was something that I really liked or something that I thought could be more effective in their presentation, I
Mhm.
would put that out there. And I was shocked at the number of people who said, no one ever responds to me. Now, there was a handful of people who would always get annoyed and or would just keep pestering
Yeah.
me. But for the most part, yeah, this idea of being authentic and approaching every interaction with, this person has something to teach me. What is that? And how can I be helpful in this exchange at this moment in time?
Yeah, and also that's being memorable. I don't know why
That's right.
I remember you, but you made a really impact in my life, and I remember you. And I think we didn't even, I never seen your face. It was on the phone.
Yeah,
And but still, when you make an impact in the conversation or you ask the right questions, it's all about the journey and what do you have in common. And there is something that I really not tolerate is the soliciting. And they trying to sell you something or tell you what you need without really getting to know you.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
and I'm all good about, I mean, because I do it all the time as an agency owner. Of course, I need to offer my services, but first I listen who you are and what you might need from me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. This is slightly off topic, but and we'll pivot back, I'm certain, but I think part of what people have lost in the last 3 to 4 years of virtual work from home, work from office, physical, is how to thread the needle through all of those types of interactions.
Yeah.
The people who are forcing return to office in a very strict and rigid way, I'm actually convinced are people who are uncomfortable with adapting and threading that needle through all the different ways that you can interact. Now, of course, there's certain things that just can't be done virtually, and I
Yeah.
understand that. But in so many cases, and I think it's what made my work with my team successful during the pandemic was because I spent 4 years in the international side of our business where even the rudimentary video conferencing, I was doing most of my work on the
Online.
phone, on conference calls. We shifted to a few video calls, but I was the one that had to learn to adapt to different time zones, different modes of operation, different cultures and styles.
Yeah.
And all of that was happening while we were trying to drive a business forward.
Well,
And
for me, it was a little different because my team and my agency was always remote. So for us, it was no difference, but the world had to adapt to how we were working already.
where you already were.
Yeah. And so we were very lucky because we had systems in place.
Yeah,
And that's really important. But I think a lot of the companies nowadays are really concerned of productivity
yeah,
because a lot of people are trying. It's not easy to work remote. It's
no,
really not easy. You have to have your space and you need to, distractions could go be the death of you.
yeah. It's a challenge to adapt, I think, sometimes. But then again, that's a zone that I've always been comfortable with. And
Mhm.
I think if you are someone who knows how to thrive in uncertainty and be uncomfortable and adapt and pivot, I think those are some of the skills that are going to be the most necessary for work going forward.
And I love that you say that because being uncomfortable, it's so important to understand that you're uncomfortable and how you're going to deal with it or
Yeah,
how you're going to handle it. Because sometimes you're uncomfortable and you keep doing things being uncomfortable,
yeah,
and that never works.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
but let's pivot a little bit back
yeah,
because I want to go back. How, I mean, you have an incredible 25 over 25 years career in global marketing, which is nowadays being global, it's easy. Let's put it that way. But when we started, we had no internet. And I always tell this story because I'm from Argentina, like everyone knows. And for many years, we weren't able to get anything from English speaking. So music that in the US, for example, is in the 80s, for me was in the 90s. So
yeah,
there was a completely different it was like a parallel life, but at the same time, different times. So it was hard to be back there and to work with different markets that they weren't as interconnected as they are today.
yeah. I, there's even if you think about it, even the regional marketing within the US
Mhm.
could be very, very different because if you didn't live in the Orlando area, for instance, then you weren't going to see the marketing programs we were doing in Orlando to promote Olive Garden, for
Mhm.
instance. And you could, in some ways, it was great because you could test things in isolation and you had a better way of testing and monitoring impact in a very clean way. I think back to my times in field marketing at Olive Garden, And one of the things that I was charged with doing was rolling out a program encouraging people to pair wine with their dinner at Olive Garden, which was just not something that people were used to, and it was a part of what we called our genuine Italian dining experience. And so we could try three different things in three different areas and compare and contrast the results. And you had clean tests, they didn't bleed into one another because someone didn't post a picture on Instagram or text another
Yeah, you
friend.
were able to isolate them.
Yeah, yeah, you were able to isolate results. Now, the flip side of that is, as I think about, as we're recording this, it's Super Bowl week. And I think about some of the Super Bowl programs that we did. And 10 years ago, the Super Bowl was in New York City, and we were launching the double cheeseburger pizza. It was the first time that I'd wrapped any sort of
For what brand
activation.
was that?
That was for Papa John's.
Okay.
Papa John's double cheeseburger pizza. And it was the first time we'd wrapped an activation behind a specific product. And I did that because I wanted to measure the impact that something like that would have on the performance, the sales performance of a single product out of the gate. Again, monitoring impact. But the advantage was being in New York City and having touch with all the media outlets, but also being able to capture content on the street when we were sampling and amplify that content all over social media, all of a sudden change the value equation of the investment in a single site kind of sampling program. And and so that's the plus of being in this kind of newly and highly connected age. But yeah, it has both sides of it. I started my career in radio promotions, and
Uh-huh. I
anyone
did too. I started in radio.
Oh my gosh. And very, very early on, it was a lot more like that old show WKRP in Cincinnati than anybody would like to know. And so I think back to some of the antics that our DJs would get into, and I think, thank God there wasn't social media back then, because I would have been putting out fires all the time. So there the ability to isolate the impact of things, I think, was great back then, but I do prefer the ability, and I think, we were talking about working with smaller brands, and in particular,
Yeah.
small to medium brands really can build themselves so much more easily now, and get their threshold of customers and threshold of awareness higher faster, because we're so interconnected.
Yeah, but at the same time, there is noise. There's noise everywhere.
Oh yeah.
So it's really, and also because everyone has the opportunity, they have a cell phone. So everyone thinks that they can do Instagram. And maybe if you're lucky, it goes well. But I always say that because you did well, something went viral or you got a few sales, it's not that you're building a brand.
Right. Right. Well, and back in the early days when Photoshop and some of the design software came out,
Oh,
everybody
those were
thought they
fun
could be,
days.
yeah, everybody thought they could be a designer.
Yeah,
And everybody now thinks they can be a content creator, and technically they can. If you have a phone,
yeah,
you could be a content creator, but you have to be a storyteller.
yep.
And
And you
the
have to have a strategy behind it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you have to know who you're targeting and what value do you bring to them. It goes back to the
But
conversation we were having. What value do
yeah,
you bring to an interaction?
because going back to the two stories you told us about Olive Garden and Papa John's, I was thinking a little bit about how important it is to measure performance and
Yeah.
to measure not only what works, also what doesn't. Because
Yeah.
actually I did a little video this week, I think for TikTok, but I was talking about how important is to know where we're failing or what stopped working. Because in the world that we live right now, the word trending for me is huge. Things are trending and they stop trending. So
Right.
we need to stop seeing what is in going down and stop working. I'm all about sharing all the resorts because we need to know what's trending up and what's trending down.
Yeah. Yeah. The fear of failure is real,
Yeah.
but the best companies talk about failing fast. But the component of failing fast is learning from it.
Mhm.
And I come from the world of retail where, you can look at sales results every single day. And in that environment, it's very tempting to just go, okay, that didn't work, move on to the next, on to the next. But there are so many really good nuggets in why something didn't make it, as opposed to just saying it didn't work, move on. I think about stuffed crust pizza with Papa John's, which was something that we were aware for many, many years that um, was something our customer wanted. Our customers really are the ultimate pizza lovers. And in that, they love all kinds of
Now I
pizza.
want pizza.
I'm sorry, the problem with working in food is anytime I have a conversation, I tend to make people hungry.
Yes.
But, the customers were the ultimate pizza consumers, and so they wanted, and ultimate pizza lovers wanted stuffed crust as an option. But several times around, we just couldn't make it work. And in the case of those failures, there was an openness finally with our new leadership team to say what were the operational challenges and work in partnership with our franchisees to say how do we get over the operational challenges that are holding us up from this, not necessarily the marketing challenges, but
That's so interesting. And many times you need to look into that. You need to listen to the data, see what's requested. I mean, analyzing data is a whole different game because
yeah,
and it requires a skill and time. It's not something that you can drive conclusions. It's like, why are we getting this data?
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of observations without true insights.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very lucky to have been taught, I'm using air quotes, taught in the Yum way of brand building, which was something that David Novak brought in when he stepped up to lead Yum Brands, of which I was a part of KFC. And we were always taught that there is a difference between observations and insights. And a great insight can launch a dozen different products, campaigns, ideas, approaches. An observation is just that. It's something you notice in the data that you might take an action, but the insight unlocks a whole world for business. For me, that insight was while I was being charged with leading the family meals business at KFC. That's everything that went in a bucket and with a bucket. And when I was given that business, it was over 50% of a restaurant's P&L.
Let me
So,
ask you a question. How big
yeah,
the percentage? Because we're talking about these insights, but then we need a professional gut feeling here.
yeah, yeah.
How
And
do you, I mean, I always work by gut feeling using the data and insights and everything. But then there's something that experience and that time that we learn from making so many mistakes and
yeah,
from making a success too. But then we have that gut feeling that tells us, is that's whispering, telling us, go in this direction, don't go
yeah.
in the other direction. How do you trust that feeling?
It, I, I think it comes with time because it's that goosebump moment, right?
Yeah.
It's that the tingling in your spine and the goosebumps of, oh my gosh, this is something. There's something here. And I personally believe it's with time and mistakes to experiment and try things um even back to my college days. I was involved in organizations and I was the general manager of the student television station. Shout out Syracuse University, go Orange. Um, and I was putting on shows and I had a show that failed miserably. And I had to think about why why I thought it was going to be a good idea and what in those assumptions were wrong. And I carried that through my career and made a lot of bets that went well and understood what those were, and decisions or recommendations that maybe didn't go well. And I paid the price for that, um, and took responsibility.
Uh,
And I think you learn enough to know when that gut level, oh, there's something here.
Yeah, but taking responsibility, and that's something I feel like lately it's been very hard that everyone wants success, and but nobody wants to take a responsibility for a failure. And
Yeah,
a failure is not a failure. It's like, oops, this didn't work.
yeah. It I learned from some great leaders. So I think that's where you align yourselves with the right people and the right leaders who not only talk the talk but walk the walk when it comes to failure. Very early in my career, still in radio promotions, I had something that went spectacularly wrong. We were giving away trips, and the tour operator of the trip went out of business.
Oh,
And oh God, yeah. I mean, it was a nut. I literally did go into the bathroom and throw up
oh,
because I was still in my mid 20s and I thought, I'm going to get fired over this. I'm going to get fired over this. And the general manager said, you know what? I looked at the same contract you did. I talked to these people too. It's my responsibility as much as it is yours. Let's go figure out how to fix it. And I think when you have those sorts of leaders, it it makes a huge difference in your ability to stand up and be accountable
yeah.
and take responsibility for something, and then talk about how do you solve it and how do you learn from it.
Yeah, always in a moment of crisis, I always say you need to step back.
Yeah,
You need to step back. You cannot be, then we'll analyze what was the problem or even who made the mistake, because it's important to acknowledge who made the mistake so it doesn't happen again. Because
yeah,
maybe it's not that person made a mistake, it was an error that came, a domino effect. Who knows? We will need to analyze that. But in the moment of crisis, you separate yourself and you look at the problem and how can we fix it?
yeah. It really stops you from assigning blame and looking instead towards the points of failure and how you solve them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you need to have. I mean, you need to have the clarity, find that moment. And I think that's something that as we get older is easier because you had so many crises already.
Yeah, I've gotten actually I regard myself as somewhat of a turnaround and crisis expert now. Having gone through multiple situations where, from a positive standpoint, it was a business in decline or a business that was stalled in the KFC family meals business that needed a reposition for growth, or going through what I went through in the 2018 PR crisis at Papa John's.
Yeah.
It's being able to your point, stop and take a breath for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and not get caught up in that circle of, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? I have to
Yeah.
do. No, you
There are two things. I always tell my team first, don't freak out until I freak out.
I like that.
Yeah, so when you see me freaking out, then you can freak out. But the other thing is that when there is a crisis, you really need to make decisions. And they can go right or they can go wrong. But what you cannot do is to act in desperation
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
because that always goes south.
Yeah,
And
that's absolutely true.
and so let me ask you a question, Melissa, because you've been in corporate for so many years
Yeah,
and now you're not anymore.
yep.
Why you decided to go this way? Why you decided that you can help different companies in different ways? Because being, I mean, you climbed the ladder, you went all the way there. And this is a question that I always have. I mean, it's a career to be in corporate, not
Yes.
only to do your job.
Yeah. As always, I think there's a personal side and a professional side. So for me, the professional side of it is around the fact that if I look at all of the experiences that I had and the ones that I'm both most proud of and were most successful, the thing that they all had in common is that they were at points of inflection or points of pivot where there was a realization that the status quo wasn't going to take us any further and or that change needed to happen. One of my friends said, when you show up, stuff has got to get done, and that's your value. And so finding that I really loved that, that's not necessarily the point at which a company always wants to be, right? They don't
Yeah.
always want to be in the change, the pivot. I'm sort of that solution to move them from where they were to where they want to be, and then to turn it over to the
Maintenance
operations
mode.
side. Yeah, and
To
then move
maintenance.
on. So professionally, that's what really excited me and what got me up and really lit me up inside.
That takes some
Yeah.
self-discovery and
Yeah.
also guts to say, and because being in corporate, being in the ladder, and I say, okay, this is not for me anymore. It takes guts.
Yeah. Well, change presents an opportunity. For me, the change that was presented, I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, and Papa John's was headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky, as was KFC, as is KFC. And Papa John's decided that they were going to move their commercial functions to a new office in Atlanta. And this is where the personal and the professional dovetail. At the time, my dad was in his early 90s, early to mid 90s, and he lives 7 minutes from me. So I wasn't going to move him and I wasn't going to leave him. So I was definitely not going to continue with Papa John's. Um, Very, very positive terms, and I cheerlead from the sidelines for them on a constant basis. And it's funny, I can still see some of the work that we did as we redeveloped the brand and the brand DNA in what
Mhm.
they're doing today. So that's a lot of fun. But I knew that I was going to need to do something that was going to allow me to be present and available to my dad. And I'm blessed that he is now 97, going on 98
Oh,
years
wow.
old. And so that personal side is what also moved me from going to another CMO, CBO type job to being on my own, because it allows me that flexibility to, take dad to a doctor's appointment. Or in December, I actually took him to New York City for the first time for 3 days.
Oh,
Never been to New York City, so I took him for Christmas. And I think women in particular are frustrated by the fact that they can't be their whole selves in a corporate environment. And it's the reason you see so many women going on to do their own thing. I think there are companies that do it very, very well, and that there are companies that make themselves um, workable for any working parent that needs to have, or any working caregiver that needs to have both their professional and their personal sides fit within that structure. But that's also why so many people are starting businesses. So yeah, for me, it was both filling my professional bucket and allowing me to use what was really unique about my talents and unique about my experiences in a certain way, but also to make sure that I'm doing the things personally that light me up.
Would you go back to a corporate job?
I One of my rules is never say never. So a few years from now, who knows? I am always open to possibilities that are presented, but I have a different perspective now on what I bring to the table, I think, and
And
what I require
that's
from.
amazing. That point of clarity to find out really what's the value that you can bring.
Yeah,
And that's something I, going back to the beginning and the interviews, is something that I always learn to ask in interviews. What can you bring to the table?
yeah, yeah. What can you bring to the table? And also, I always find it's so telling to hear, what are you most proud of?
Mm-hmm.
So what thing that you did, or accomplishment or contribution, are you most proud of? And it can be anything.
Yeah.
And I've heard incredible stories, and it gives a little bit of insight into who the person is and what makes them tick and what lights them up.
Yeah. Something to me is concerning when I do interviews, though, is I I'm ready to learn. And when they ask that question, and of course, I really expect someone to keep learning and keep learning. That's a given. But in an interview, it's something that is like, how can you contribute? I'm going back again and after beginning of the conversation, how can you contribute? You can connect with your team? Because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We work together. And
Yeah.
and that's how, as individuals, we're going to be looking at data. We're going to be doing, but I see the things from my point of view with my experiences. And I always value my team, like maybe someone from my graphic design team, can they see something from a different point of view because they are only looking at the design.
Yeah. It's I- when we started to work on the international business, the at Papa John's, one of the things that we figured out was that we had big problems that no one, or big challenges, barriers, I should say, that nobody had really put effort against. And so one of the biggest keys was not just identifying those barriers, but to your point, bringing people together in teams that maybe weren't necessarily the stereotypical functions or experiences or backgrounds that you would have brought to a team. So looking for complementary or unique perspectives as part of a team, I think is incredibly important, and it's something that actually I contribute. So when I come to a problem, one of the things that I'll look for is who has a unique perspective on this problem
I
that
love that.
maybe hasn't been talked to. And how do I bring that perspective? I remember putting a person from global supply chain on the project around aligning our technology globally. Why? Because what he had already solved was how to adapt a specific need in different countries and different conditions. So he was facing and had solved a similar challenge, but this was just on a different topic or scale. So he could bring a different perspective to the technology experts who were part of it.
And that's so smart, but so smart of you. But the only way you did that is because you really understood the business and you understood how it worked. It's really hard to bring and to look outside the box. You don't understand the whole thing. You cannot see the whole picture.
Yeah, I think talking a little bit about framing the problem and really investigating the problem is also a big part of this. So I won't I won't identify the company, but I was working with a client who is looking to transform a set of businesses that developed before the pandemic and then through the pandemic based on the operational constraints around them. So when
Mm.
they started the business, it was one set of constraints, and then the pandemic put another set. So they started this second business, and then the laws changed, and they started this third business. Well, now they're looking at how do I bring these all together and make them a cohesive brand. So part of the questions and the defining of the problem was really talking very specifically about the environment that each of those businesses was started in, the customer base and the objectives of each of those businesses. And now, what is the future? What does the future look like? And how do the owners and leaders see those businesses operating? And then my job is to help connect the dots and put it forward for them in maybe a way that they hadn't seen it themselves because they were too close to it and because they've lived through every one of those pivots. So
And again, is put distance from the problem to
yeah,
see the solution.
yeah.
Melissa, thank you, thank you, thank you for being here with us today. It was an amazing conversation, and thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much, Lara, and thank you for putting up with my cold and not speaking probably as well to things as I could have.
Oh, it couldn't be any better. Thank you so much. And to you guys, thank you for being here, having some more coffee with me, and I will see you next week.
Find everything you need at laraschmoisman.com or in the episode notes right below. Don't forget to subscribe.
It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.